Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I just wanted to save it quickly. So these SGAT FIT layers are going to be the most helpful in determining how risky your property is. So what these layers are, there's a whole bunch of them, and there's things like debris jams and beaver dams and alluvial fans and all of these things. These show, mainly the beaver dam and the debris jam, show where the river has been blocked, or the river channel is blocked. And so down here by Beth's property, this is the main stem of the Winooski, so it's pretty big. So it's not like a beaver's going to come over here and dam up the whole river, or even just part of the river. So we're not going to see very many of those. But maybe if we go down here by a smaller tributary like the Huntington, we can see it. And something that's a little annoying about this mapper is you have to be zoomed in close enough for it to show up. So if you zoom in, then, only then, will it show up. So there's a beaver dam, and this I put up. This is the cross-section location. And this is really just from the stream geomorphic assessment. What they do is, in these places, they take the cross-section of the river and measure the area of it. So then they can find the velocity of the river and see how much water is flowing through there, so they can calculate the volume of water going through this stream at any given time. So that's important for them, but who cares if they measured the river there? It's not like all of these layers are going to be very helpful in determining if your property is going to flood. And these are bridges where roads go over the river, or culverts where the river is kind of channeled under something. So those are important to look for, especially if you're on a smaller tributary or a small stream that can be blocked by debris jams and beaver dams. And this alluvial fan is just an area where flooding has spread the river out. So let's go back to Bruce and Beth's property over here. The next important thing, this is dredging, and this is really important because commercial mining and gravel mining and dredging along the river will take gravel mainly, but also debris out. So if we zoom in, we can see, I think down here, if you're in close enough, that there's mining here. And what's really the big deal about taking stuff out of the river? But when you dredge the bottom of the river and you mine gravel or sediment or sand or whatever, for whatever purpose you want, what you're doing is deepening the channel of the river. And so that will channel the water down the course of the river, and will make the water go faster, moving along faster, and have less of a chance to kind of overflow the banks of the river. And overflowing is what's going to slow it down. And so when it's deeper, it's going to be moving faster, and it's going to have more energy with it. And that's trouble when you think about flooding. So dredging is a good thing to look for along the river next to your property. The next thing that's going to be important is, here's grade control, and that's essentially controlling how steep the river is. And they're not going to do this on the main branch of the Winooski, but over here in Huntington, on the Huntington River, they might. I should turn the layer on first. So maybe up here there'll be a dam or a ledge or something, or a little waterfall. I got turn the layer on. And see, here's one. It looks like it's a little ledge or something. And these are important if you're thinking about flooding, because they're stopping the water upstream and they're collecting it. So if there's a dam, it's going to pool water. It's going to back up water behind it. And so if you think in flooding situations, if these things fail, or if that dam kind of gives way, that's going to release all the water that it's holding back. And that can add a lot of water to your area. And other layers are gullies. Gullies are important, especially when you're concerned about flash floods, because they'll collect water that drains off really quickly and channel it in a very confined space. So gullies are important, but happen more in the mountains, so there aren't any gullies around here. But those are forces that are caused by erosion and cause erosion, which still is important when you're thinking about flooding. And so here, this tab, migration, I don't know if there's any around here, but avulsion, braiding, and migration are probably the three most important in this layer. Avulsion's where the river takes part of the bank and washes it away and carries it away with it, and that shows signs of instability. And migration is where the course of the river changes frequently, or migrates, and so that's important because it shows that it's the river system isn't a stable entity. It's not. It's fluid and dynamic, and it's going to constantly be changing. And perhaps they should have shown a little bit here, because we can see these old oxbows, which means that the river used to flow this way, but now it doesn't. So either man-made with the construction of 89, or naturally, this river has migrated from this route to this straighter route. And my bet would be that it's been straightened. Braiding occurs here. Maybe this would be the best example around here. Braiding occurs when one river branches off and splits and kind of braids itself around islands or berms of gravel in the river. And what happens is that it kind of weaves and doesn't just follow one straight path. And that's good because it slows it down, but it's also a little dangerous, because if any one of these little channels gets blocked by debris or a beaver dam or whatever, it's going to force the other channels to carry that water that would normally go through here. And especially in times of flooding, that can overwhelm the river and cause flooding. So that's an important tab to look at. Next probably would be stormwater input. This is very important. I know there's a couple over here. Here's two actually. And stormwater input are inputs from drainage systems that collect rain and stormwater from all of the impermeable surfaces around. And so these two are probably from the highway, the road, and maybe from all of this. But when there's lots of impermeable surfaces, which happens a lot around cities, when there is a rain event, all of that water can't be absorbed into the ground like it would if it landed in trees or on fields or in grass. And so they're diverted and put into river systems. And so these inputs are important because when the river's high during a flooding event, and if it's raining a lot, then all that rain that would normally seep into the ground but can't because of the impermeable surfaces around is going to be added to the river. And that is going to increase the amount of water in the river, which is dangerous in times of flooding. So those are good to keep in mind. And here, stream crossings, it shows, fords and animal crossings, but, that's not very important to you. You don't need to see all of these layers, but you can explore them, and they're kind of cool. This mass failure, this would be an important one. Mass failure is when sides of the river and the banks of the river give way and fail and fall into the river, which is another sign of instability. And if that's close to your property and you have a field that's right on the river, then you have a chance that you're going to lose that land, and it could even just fall into the river and go away completely, which would be terrible. So mass failure is something to look for. All of these tabs, armoring and revetment, this is important because it shows where the river has been strengthened by man. The armoring, an example of armoring would be riprap or any cement or any engineered structure that deters the river from following the path it wants to follow. And so here we can see that the right bank over here has been armored, and so this might have some riprap, but it's here to protect this rail line and this road from being undercut by the river, causing these two pretty important infrastructural units to fail. And so that's really important to look at. A lot of here, this buffer too, where buffer is less than 25 feet, this is important too. And even though, there may be a buffer that's sufficient enough, it's 25 feet or more, that still doesn't mean that the river isn't being encroached upon by people. And so this development tab this layer shows where development has occurred alongside the river and kind of is encroaching on the river, where people have built railroads or roads or houses or any sort of development along the river. And this is important. A lot of this hydrologic processes and stream modifications, a lot of the problems coming is because of development along the river and kind of the clash between people and the river. And the river, is a force of nature. It's going to take its own course when it needs to, but we can build on it and reinforce it and armor it kind of to our needs and engineer it physically, which is going to last for a while, but after too long, the river is going to win always. And we saw that a lot with Hurricane Irene last year, where lots of roads and houses and whatnot, any development kind of was destroyed. And so here's a tab. This is encroachment. We can see that this entire stretch of the river has been encroached on, either with roads or railroads or improved paths or berms or anything that we build. So development and encroachment and armoring kind of go hand in hand. But maybe armoring is a little different in that this is where we have strengthened the side of the riverbank purposefully because we know it's weak. While these other things are just us building where the river wants to be, not where it wants to be really badly. So we armor and we reinforce those parts. There's also an erosion tab here, which is important. We can open it up and see that there's bank erosion on either side, and this is also helpful because it shows, erosion shows that the river is eating away at the bank, and that's because the river wants to flow where that is. And in this case, we've straightened this stretch of the Winooski very much, so there's a lot of erosion because it wants to meander and it wants to slow down and dissipate its energy, but it can't because we've built up around it. So this is kind of a sign that the river wants something that it's not getting. So that's the erosion tab. Over here we can see mass failure, where banks have fallen in, and this will show us which bank. But maybe my favorite and perhaps the most important is straightening. And if you see and turn it on this stretch, this entire river here, this entire river stretch is straightened, very, very much so. And a very big deal of this straightening comes from its proximity to 89. And I wish I could zoom out and still have this straightening on here to show you, but if we go out on a bigger scale, we can see that from Richmond to probably even Montpelier or Waterbury, the Winooski is very straightened. And if we zoom into any of these layers, we can zoom into any of these places, we can see that the river's straightened along here. And I wish this layer would show up when it was zoomed out fully, so you could see that it's been straightened all along here, but you can't. Conversely, when we go up here to where we know that the river meanders, over here we're not going to see any straightening along here because the river is kind of left to its own devices and even meanders back on itself here. So for straightening is very important because straightening works hand in hand with power displacement. So if the river is straight, it can't dissipate any of its power. Can't dissipate any of its power. But if it's straightened, it can't dissipate any of its power, but if it gets to wander and kind of zigzag, then it'll be less violent. Okay, I'm going to pause one more time.